Now, the Israeli permanent representative at the United Nations did not mince words when he demanded that the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres be dismissed from his position at the United Nations. This after Guterres called for a humanitarian pause to what he termed the Israeli offensive on Gaza. Listen to this two sound bites from Antonio Guterres and the Israeli permanent representative to the United Nations.
The attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation.
Kids witness horror which cannot be described by words. Mr. Secretary General, in what world do you live? Definitely, this is not our world.
Meanwhile, the Indian envoy to the United Nations has reiterated India's stance and condemned the Hamas terror attack and the brutalities against the Israeli civilians. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, meanwhile, has called out terror and terrorists, whether it was perpetuated by Lashkar-e-Toiba in Mumbai or by Hamas in Israel. Listen into these two soundbites.
India has always supported a negotiated two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine issue, leading to the establishment of a sovereign, independent and viable state of Palestine, living within secure and recognized borders side by side in peace with Israel, taking into account the legitimate security concerns of Israel. Towards this, we reiterate the need for an early resumption of direct peace negotiations. We also continue to support the Palestinian people through our bilateral development partnership, which covers a wide range of sectors, including health, education, women's empowerment, entrepreneurship, and information technology. We are also supporting grassroots Palestinian institutions in their developmental initiatives.
Executed in front of their parents, and so many taken hostage in Gaza. We have to ask, indeed it must be asked, where is the outrage? Where is the revulsion? Where is the rejection? Where is the explicit condemnation of these horrors? We must affirm the right of any nation to defend itself and to prevent such horror from repeating itself. No member of this council, no nation in this entire body could or would tolerate the slaughter of its people. As this Council and the UN General Assembly have repeatedly affirmed, all acts of terrorism are unlawful and unjustifiable. They're unlawful and unjustifiable whether they target people in Nairobi or Bali, in Luxor, Istanbul or Mumbai, in New York or Kibbutz Berry. They're unlawful and unjustifiable whether they're carried out by ISIS.
Now, I want to delve deeper into this conversation and the dilemma the world has and United Nations has raised in that speech that was made by Antonio Guterres. It is the truth that everyone's hands are covered in blood, from Afghanistan to Iraq, Syria to Ukraine, and now Israel and Gaza. So the question arises, what is okay and what is not? And also, an even bigger question. Does the world decide what is right and what is not, depending upon which country initiates the onslaught? When a terror attack takes place in the United States or say in India, it is a blow to a country. But when it happens in a small country like Israel or the Gaza Strip, it is an existential crisis for the country itself. Then wouldn't that country have the right to defend itself? In war, collateral damage is inevitable. That's the unfortunate truth of wars. Then be it Afghanistan or Ukraine, Iraq or Syria, Israel or Gaza. So what is the threshold? Who decides what is enough, how much is enough, and how long into the war is too much? To answer all these questions, let's quickly get in my panelists into the discussion. I start my conversation with Ambassador Suresh Goyal. Now, Ambassador, there have been a lot of these developments that are taking place in Israel and Gaza, but more importantly, what the statements that have coming in from world leaders at the UNSC that took place yesterday. Now, the big question arises, and that's where the world is divided. That is the killing of innocents, whether they are Israelis or whether they are Gazans. What is right, what is wrong, and who decides what is wrong and what is right?
Is the question over, Megha? So shall I'm starting
Yes, sir,
now.
Absolutely. The question is over. Please go ahead.
Now, it's not a question of who is innocent. In a war, there is no one who is innocent. Everybody is perpetrating the acts of war, and committing the acts of war is not innocence, because you start the war with a particular objective, whatever objective it is, and I'm not justifying whether the objective is moral, immoral, whatever it is. If somebody has been forced to start a war, obviously the compulsions must have been far greater than the losses that they will incur in the act of war. I'm saying that basically because there is no doubt whatsoever that Hamas, whether you call it terrorist organization, so far India has not labeled it as terrorist organization for whatever reason. There are two countries who call it the terrorist organization. It is not considered to be a terrorist organization even as per the UN list. But whatever it is, the act committed by it in killing those innocent civilians in the kibbutz who were actually enjoying the music at that time is unforgivable. No doubt about this. You want to call it the act of terrorism? Be my guest. You can label it whatever you want, but it was unforgivable. In retaliation, when Israel, not sending the ground forces, but when Israel resorted to aerial bombardment, practically put the whole Gaza Strip to hostages. There was not allowing any kind of food, any kind of material for humanitarian supplies to go through it. Was it forgivable? If you call it, it was a justified retaliation, be my guest. But under no law, holding civilians as hostages is acceptable. There are humanitarian laws, there are laws of war under which you cannot hold hostage the entire civilian population. Israel did that. Israel can justify. But was it acceptable? Was it legal or not legal? Certainly not. And that is what Antonio Guterres is saying.
So when a Hiroshima-Nagasaki bomb drop happens and there are millions and millions of Japanese who have died, and the repercussions of that Hiroshima-Nagasaki atomic bombing happens, which are seen generations to come. Even today, there are ailments that their generations, their kids, their grandkids, the great-grandkids continue to suffer. Okay, the same question to you, Gautam Mukherjee. Again, what is justified, what is not?
Well, Megha, in the Gaza Strip, I saw a seasoned Palestinian diplomat saying that you want to eliminate Hamas. Well, Hamas is everywhere. Hamas has won 3 elections in a row. It has been running the country or the Strip for over 15 years. They are intertwined with everybody in the Gaza Strip. So this is the big problem, that Hamas is not only there by popular approval of the Palestinian people, but the Palestinian Authority is totally toothless, and it is pointless to go and see them, though various people do, including Macron lately. What is the point? He is toothless and has no authority. Hamas has all the authority, and Hamas is backed by the Palestinian people. So now to try and split the beam and say, it's not fair to attack an entire people, men, women, and children, when you have a basic beef with the Hamas, well, please tell me, how do you sort out the wheat from the chaff here?
Yeah.
And when we are talking.
Okay. All right. Then, Gautam, another question to you. Now, when we talk about there is an attack in a big country like the United States of America and the World Trade Center that was attacked in 1911, or we talk about 26/11 that happened in India, or then several other parliament attack, this is the terror attack. It's a big blow for these countries. But when a small country like Israel is attacked, it is an existential crisis itself for Israel. It's tiny. Gaza Strip, about 66 kilometers, is perhaps a distance that you cover between Delhi and further up in Gurgaon. So when there are strikes that are happening inside of Israel or these terrorist attacks that take place, you cannot equate what happened in India or what happened in the United States of America.
Is that for the last 50, it's been 50 years since the whole existence and legitimacy of Israel has been called into question. The last time was in 1973, Yom Kippur. Now you're doing it all over again. Now the point is, over the last almost 20 years, Israel has tried its best to ameliorate relationships with the Palestinians. They employ many Palestinians. As many as 20,000 of them come and go on a daily basis. They are employed in the kibbutz, and unfortunately they were responsible for the attacks in the first day in the kibbutz, killing innocents and babies and so forth. So it's ironic, but all the Qatari money is channeled through Israel, and Israel hands it out to different bodies in the Gaza Strip. So,
Okay.
what has happened here is they've been taken by surprise by people they thought had given up the old way of denying the right to exist to Israel, and they've gone back to first principles. So now what are you meant to do?
Okay.
You're meant to take them out. It's the only thing to do.
Fair enough. Particularly, then another question that arises, it has been a point of contention. Why wouldn't Egypt and Jordan and other countries, the neighboring countries attached to Israel, allow for the Palestinians, the innocent Palestinians, to get inside their borders, to cross the borders? And on one side, they talk about the Palestinian lives and how their safety is utmost important. And on the other, you are looking the other way in the demand, in the help that is sought by the Palestinians to cross into the Rafah border and get into Egypt.
Megha, first of all, that's exactly the reason, because they know that it's good to have solidarity march for the Palestinians. But if you allow these organizations and elements to cross over, they'll do exactly in Egypt what they did in Jordan in the 1970s, and then you would have another Black September. Fundamentally, let me tell you one thing, what the Hamas did on 6th or 7th of October. 7th of October was not a terror attack, it was a military grade invasion. And so if you have a military grade invasion, you would have a military grade response. And was that Hamas not aware what kind of response the Israelis will give? Or is it that they were waiting for it so that the victim card can be played? Gautam sir mentioned it rightly that there is no person who is not a Hamas supporter. Unfortunately, yes, there are people dying. It is tragic. No death can be celebrated, but it is the same Palestinians who were celebrating, spitting on the mutilated dead bodies of the Israelis on the day when that incident happened, and those bodies were brought into the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, but then again, the question that the United Nations and Antonio Guterres and a number of these organizations, peoples, even Harvard's and Ivy League organizations, colleges, universities are asking is, does that justify for the Israeli forces to kill them?
No, so basically, does that justify even the existence of United Nations? Because all these problems today you have its genesis in 1945 onward, and UN as an organization has been a total failure, a tremendous failure in terms of solving any of the problems. Tell me one thing, What is the stand of United Nations on the fact that the entire leadership of Hamas has been given a refuge and safe haven by Qatar? What is the stand? I mean, does United Nations even have a definition of terrorism? There is no definition of terrorism. Does United Nations have a dispute resolution mechanism and a conflict prevention mechanism? Where is United Nations? Why does it not come forward to prevent disputes from taking the shape of conflicts? What is the stand of United Nations and its Secretary General? They should be put to shame. What was the stand on Iraq? What was the stand on Libya? What was the stand on Ukraine issue? What did they do? Did they ever call? No, please let me finish, because if you have called me for a show, please give me at least 5 minutes.
But then I also need to demarcate time for every single individual who is part of this discussion.
I have not even spoken 3 minutes, Megha.
Yeah, quickly, yes.
So please let me, then what happens is that, has the West been ever called for crime against, war crimes? Have you ever the United Nations coming up and saying what happened in Iraq was wrong and there should be, there should be trial for war crimes against the leadership of United States? No. So they have sold the morality for the highest bidder. Frankly speaking, you are entirely on your own to defend you in your country. UN people were the first to run into the bunker when a terror attack or the shelling used to happen in Kashmir. That was the reality. So UN doesn't exist. It only pimps for the West, frankly speaking. Today, Antony Blinken is connecting it with 2611 because of their compulsion. Frankly, before 2611, they never considered Lashkar-e-Taiba as a major terror organization. All the sanctions happen under UN Resolution 1267, Al-Qaeda Sanctions Act. Which means that unless you are connected with Al-Qaeda and ISIS, unless you are a threat to the West, you are not a terror organization. So this is entirely a hypocrisy going on. Israel is on his own. India is on its own. You fight your war. You care two hoots about what a Secretary General says because he gets his salary from the West. If he doesn't say what the script is written for him, he will resign.
United States of America, UK, the rest of the world, the French president right now in Israel have been supporting this war, condemned the terrorist attack that happened on 7th of October. So where does United Nations stand in such a situation? Is it then its stance being taken as an organization or a body which is quote unquote woke? Is what has been the allegation put forth against a number of these organizations and individuals and bodies that have come out on the streets in largest of the numbers, hundreds and thousands of them, holding these protests and chanting slogans condemning the Israeli attack on the Palestinians. Now, Adit, quickly coming to you on the question about the relevance and the credibility of the United Nations and the UNSC with regards to the reforms that have been sought by India and other nations of the global south, that needs to be a much needed change since the formation of the United Nations after the World War. Now, in such a scenario where Israel has come down condemning United Nations, condemning Antonio Guterres, India has time and again said this. The Prime Minister has made these speeches and attacked the United Nations, UNSC, with regards to its veto power, and a number of times, unfortunately, there are wrongs that have happened against one particular country to the jargon of the world. So what do we do about the United Nations? Is there a reform that can really be possible? Because we have been asking for it for a really long time.
Megha, I have to concur with Potikrit on this. Reforms with regards to an institution like United Nations is possibly not possible because, it's essentially a toothless organization as we see them today, where they've even fallen extremely short of defining, fundamentals of what terrorism is. Just watching how Mr. Guterres has conducted himself, he's essentially normalizing and advocating extremism and terrorism. What he is doing is essentially providing intellectual cover fire to extremists and terrorists at this point. And that is what we see. The shift of the global left in the 1980s is the manifestation of this, where their initial position was being pro-Israeli. Now that is transcended into becoming pro-Palestinian, which is why they do not even keep pretenses of normalizing barbarism and brutal indiscriminate killings as we saw that was unleashed on the 7th and 8th of October. So much so, Megha, there's out of the 100 American universities, only 47 of them have actually come out to condemn on what essentially transpired on the 7th and 8th of October. The rest of them, have been dilly-dallying. They've been playing politically correct. And that is where the problem essentially lies, where there is a silent majority which is essentially advocating either softly or overtly again for what Hamas has essentially done. And the problem essentially lies with the leadership of the West. While the leadership in the West, like my Prime Minister Rishi Sunak or Joe Biden or Justin Trudeau may have come out to say, that Israel has the right to self-defend itself. But what is essentially unleashing outside on the streets of London is deplorable, where normalizing anti-Semitism, where normalizing heckling at Jewish people, or vandalizing Jewish businesses is not being condemned by those particular governments. Nobody's been put behind bars in London with regards to the vandalism that we've seen, with regards to the vandalism of the restaurants or the Jewish businesses that was conducted on the 9th and 10th of October. So that is where a fundamental problem lies, where the West needs to show a bit of spine.
Okay.
And I'm glad that, Gilead Ardern, the permanent representative of the United Nations from Israel, has demonstrated some spine, not only to demand the removal of Antonio Guterres, but also tacitly calling out those who are essentially providing extremists with the kind of intellectual cover fire, and denying the visas to UN representatives on the back of this. So, in summary, Antonio Guterres is unfit to serve this for being an apologist for massive.
Okay, Gautam, then this debate worldwide has flipped on its head, because the Western countries, UK, US, France, are come out in aggressive support to Israel and have decided to condemn terrorism that takes place against Israel, whether it is Hamas or whether it is Hezbollah or it is Al-Qaeda. As Patrikrit rightly mentioned, when India has been facing terrorism from Pakistan, which provides safe havens to Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, there wasn't many statements that came out in support of India. America has continued to support the quote-unquote rights of freedom and rights of autonomy for the Kashmiri people. Now, suddenly this change of heart is also because what is happening in Israel.
This is what happens with your own Frankenstein monsters. I'll give you an example. A few busloads of anti-Israel protesters were headed towards the Israeli embassy. They were rounded up several kilometers away from the embassy, put into buses, arrested, taken away, and released. It's as simple as that. Whereas the West has been paying ducks and drakes, choosing whom to back and whom not to back. Now they've got 3 million Muslims in Britain, similar, if not 3 million, but over 1 million Muslims in America. You've got lots of Muslims in Canada, Australia, etc. Now, if you let them, and Khalistanis for that matter, if you let them misbehave once, twice, 3 times, how do you crack down after that? You can still, but you're afraid to, because you think, it is going to affect your electoral chances, the media is going to jump on you, and so on. So this selective approach to terrorism and deciding our terrorists are bad, your terrorists are good, this kind of thing which we have had to endure as Indians for the last several decades has now come back to bite them. As far as the UN goes, Guterres seems to be subtly promoting the Chinese line. It is quite clear that the UN is thoroughly infiltrated by the Chinese. We've seen it extensively in the WHO. And Guterres saying that this did not happen in a vacuum is an out-and-out Chinese line, backed also by Russia. So
That's
This is a highly politicized UN, and one wonders whether it is just a matter of opinion, and that the Secretary General feels, or he is also on the payroll.
Yeah, okay. Patrick, then quickly, with regards to selective condemnation of terrorism that emanates out of various parts of the world, where Pakistan has not only been removed from the blacklist but also from the grey list. There are reports that are pouring in as per sources that India may just want to take Canada into the FATF because they have been ignorant, they have been facilitating terror funding in Canada. Now, again, the question mark on United States and the rest of the world in the West, why not so much angst and anger and condemnation to all these countries, and particularly Pakistan?
That's exactly the point, Megha, because it's a matter of convenience and selective approach. See, now, the most important thing is when India would take the issue of FATF sanctions on Canada, I think many of these people will be surprised. How can you put a G7 country into that bracket? That is where India is saying UN must think about the whole world and not only for certain countries. Secondly, UN as an organization should think about or anticipate the future potential of conflicts of today and what role shape they can take and make approach in terms of preventing them. What is the role of UN? Does it have a plan to prevent what is happening in Israel right now into a regional conflict? Do they have a plan in place to prevent it? Do they even understand there's a strong potential of a 9/11 kind of a terror attack in Western Europe or somewhere else as a consequence of what is happening in Israel today? Does UN have a policy department which analyzes these things, or is it that they depend on the Pentagon and the the FBI and the CIA for everything? This is where the problem is, because UN, what is the purpose of UN? Is it an extension of G7, or is it something which is meant to take care of the whole world and everybody's concern and aspiration? And that's where I think Israel is fed up today. Gautam ji can say that they can be under the payroll of the Chinese and the Russians, but let me tell you, Qatar is a strong ally of the West. The whole leadership of Hamas is sitting in Qatar. What is the stand of Antony Blinken in that case? What is the stand of United Nation in that case? So we have a selective approach, and let me tell you, just 10 seconds. Because organizations like UN is behaving like this, that's the reason G20 kind of forums will become far more stronger, because nobody will care to reform beyond a point. These fed up, useless organizations, they'll find out alternatives. We don't care about UN today. That's the reality, Megha.
Okay, all right. So then, Adit, why do these UNSC and UNGA meetings and bodies continue to make global headlines?
Because of the kind of ludicrous statements that come out, like we've seen today. I mean, who comes to a UNSC stage and says that even war has rules and use that as a diatribe towards a country which is essentially experienced the worst kind of indiscriminate massacres that have happened? For Antonio Guterres to essentially come out and say something like that in itself was intellectual bankruptcy of the highest order. We can keep sitting here and debating about why UNSC exists and why UNSC essentially say the kind of things they say. But the time has essentially come for countries like India, for countries like Israel to call out the duplicity, the hypocrisy. Why does the UN Security Council never voice any opinion about the Balochistan issue? Because it's convenient. It's easy for them to get out of it. It's not a world issue because it's Muslims fighting Muslims. That doesn't become a global problem for them, which is why the cause of the Baloch people never surfaces in the UNSC debates. So, that sort of duplicity and hypocrisy will continue to exist.
Okay, all right. I'm out of time, but it is a situation where can United Nations or the UNSC or the UNJ really be ignored and sidelined or dismissed? Because you see, when you have the likes of Antony Blinken, when you have the likes of S. Jaishankar, when you have the likes of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the world leaders then addressing the UNGA, UNSC, the world is going to look up and take notice. So reform, how soon is it going to happen? Is it tardy for the world, the West, to not take much notice of India and other superpowers across, other important emerging powers of the global South, middle powers of the global South? And And is it at the end of the day a game of being an economic power? Because China was gotten into the UNSC because it has become a power which throws its heft. It is the second biggest, largest economy of the world, and no matter how bitter the truth is, we will have to swallow it.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.